A young couple vanished without a trace during their honeymoon road trip in the summer of 1991, just days after exchanging vows under a cloudless Texas sky. Driving west in their brand-new white Chevy Suburban, they were last seen passing through a dusty desert town on the edge of Arizona. No one ever heard from them again. But 18 years later, a man planning a hiking trip was zooming through satellite images on Google Maps when something caught his eye. A strange metallic shape buried in the heart of a remote canyon. A white outline. A glint. A forgotten vehicle. That single discovery would unravel a chilling mystery authorities had long closed, and lead one grieving brother into a decades-old secret no one was ever meant to uncover. The internet has a strange way of reviving ghosts. Mark Griffith wasn't looking for missing people. He wasn't a detective, a journalist, or even a true crime buff. He just wanted a change of scenery, something off-grid, something untouched. A hiking trip in the Arizona desert felt right. Solitude, silence, sandstone. It started with a casual click on Google Maps. He panned over the canyons near the Colorado Plateau, scanning for high ridges and hidden ravines. The terrain was harsh, like it had been carved in anger. He zoomed in slowly, exploring every twist in the rock. Then, something caught his eye. A shimmer. A shape that didn't belong. It looked like part of the earth at first. A white smudge half swallowed by rust-red soil. But the lines were too clean, too symmetrical. He zoomed closer. What emerged was unmistakable. The faded, boxy outline of a large vehicle wedged awkwardly between two rock walls like it had fallen from the sky and never been found. Mark leaned back in his chair. His apartment, dim and silent, seemed to fade around him. He felt the chill of something forgotten. He checked the date stamp on the satellite image, July 2009. There were no roads nearby. He dropped a pin. That night, unable to shake the image, he posted it on a hiking forum. Strange vehicle shape in remote canyon. Anyone know what this is? He figured no one would respond. But by morning, the thread had blown up. Dozens of replies. Wild theories. And then one comment, short, almost buried, changed everything. Looks like a '91 Suburban. That the same one that disappeared during a honeymoon trip back in the day. Emily and Aaron Dawson? Creepy. The names meant nothing to Mark. Not yet. But within 72 hours, those names would consume the internet and bring a haunted brother, long-buried grief, and a trail of secrets roaring back to life from the heart of the desert. June 1991. The sun hung low over the Texas horizon as Aaron Dawson adjusted his tie in the motel mirror, brushing lint off his sleeves with the nervousness of a man about to start forever. Emily stood behind him, barefoot, veil gone, her white sundress falling just below her knees, wrinkled from the ceremony, but she didn't care. Her hair was wild from the convertible ride, her lipstick smudged from laughter and kisses. They'd gotten married in a courthouse with no guests. Just a judge, 2 fake rings from a vending machine, and a Polaroid of them laughing under the no smoking sign. It was exactly how they wanted it, messy, honest, unannounced. By noon, they were back on the road, 2 duffel bags in the trunk, $1,400 in wedding cash folded into a glovebox Bible, and a cassette player rattling in the dashboard, playing Emily's mixtape over the roar of desert wind. They were headed west, toward Grand Canyon country, toward nothing in particular. That was the last anyone ever saw of them. No phone calls, no postcards, no flat tires reported, no credit card use, no speeding tickets. Just silence. A white 1991 Chevy Suburban vanishing off the map. At first, no one panicked. They were newlyweds, probably off-grid, camping, impulsive. Emily was always running from something, and Aaron always followed. It was part of their charm. But by the third day, her sister called the police. By day 7, missing posters went up across Arizona. By the second week, rangers had scoured every known road, every rest stop, every overlook. Nothing. No vehicle, no wreckage, no tire tracks, not even a broken mirror glinting under the sun. It was as if the desert had swallowed them whole, and no one had noticed. Aaron's parents clung to the theory they'd eloped overseas. Emily's mother insisted they were murdered and buried somewhere deep in Bureau land. But after 6 months of dead leads, the case went cold. The files were boxed, the photos shelved. Time moved on. People forgot. Except for one person, Jake Dawson, Aaron's younger brother. He never stopped looking. And 18 years later, that old wound was about to be ripped wide open. Jake Dawson never unpacked Aaron's guitar. It sat in the corner of his one-bedroom apartment, untouched for 18 years, still strung, still out of tune, still exactly where Aaron left it the day before his honeymoon. Jake had been 23 when his older brother disappeared. A fresh paramedic, 1 month into the job, still shaky with his trauma certifications, still chasing his big brother's shadow, and always falling short. He remembered that morning like a recording burned into his brain. Aaron and Emily had stayed at their place in Austin the night before heading out. The three of them shared pancakes over paper plates. Emily had tried to convince them to name their future dog Pancake. She laughed so hard she cried. But something was off. Aaron had been unusually quiet, sipping his coffee too slow. And Emily, she waited until Aaron stepped outside for gas. She leaned across the kitchen island, brushing Jake's hand with hers. "Don't let anyone shut this down," she whispered. He didn't understand what she meant. Not then. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she knew something. He would replay that moment 1,000 times over the years, every word, every glance, every breath. When the police stopped searching, Jake didn't. While his parents tried to forget, he downloaded road maps and highlighted ranger trails. While others moved on, he stayed behind, reading coroner reports, scanning pawn shop logs, even joining missing persons forums under anonymous usernames. He aged with the case. Grew gray before 30, lost jobs, lost girlfriends, lost years. But he kept the guitar. He kept the voicemail from Emily's mom, shaky and tired, asking if he'd heard from them. He kept the ticket stub from their last movie night, the week before they left. And every 6 months, like clockwork, he called the sheriff's department and asked if there was any update. There never was. Then came the message, a private one, on a dusty old hiking forum. Just 4 lines. "Hey man, this might sound crazy, but someone spotted a weird van shape on Google Maps near a canyon in Arizona. Looks like a 90s Suburban. Coordinates attached. Thought you should see it." Jake clicked the link, and then he stopped breathing. The night before they vanished had never truly ended for Jake. It would replay in fragments, not like a movie, but like static from a broken cassette. A flash of Emily's face, a pause in Aaron's voice, that single moment in the kitchen, hanging heavier than the years that followed. It had been quiet that night. Austin's humid summer clung to the windows. Aaron had gone out to refuel the Suburban. Emily stayed behind to rinse the dishes, humming some slow song under her breath. The faucet dripped rhythmically. Jake was sitting on the couch when she walked over and sat across from him, towel in hand, still drying a plate that didn't need drying. She stared at it for a moment, then at him. Her eyes, always lively, looked pinned, not scared exactly, just bracing. "You know your brother trusts people too easily," she said softly. Jake frowned. "What's going on?" She smiled. That tight, polite kind of smile people wear when they've already made a decision. Then she leaned closer, voice low, heartbeat clear. "Don't let anyone shut this down." That was it. He asked what she meant. She didn't answer, just stood up, placed the dry plate back into the cupboard, and changed the subject like she hadn't just dropped a loaded gun on the floor. Jake had spent years trying to decode it. Shut what down? The trip? A conversation? A secret? He would later find out Emily had been making late-night calls from payphones, that she'd stopped showing up to her job the last week before the wedding, that she had withdrawn nearly all her savings and hidden it in her suitcase, without telling anyone, not even Aaron. But that night, she'd said nothing more, just smiled too hard, hugged Jake too long. And when Aaron returned, honking the horn from outside like some excited teenager, she kissed Jake on the cheek and said, "We'll send a postcard." There was no postcard, just a van that vanished into dust, and a single whispered warning Jake had never been able to forget. Jake clicked the link. It opened Google Maps. The screen zoomed in automatically, as if fate had bookmarked the coordinates itself. At first, it looked like nothing, just another corner of the desert, dry gulches, jagged rocks, and endless red dust. But then, he saw it. That glint again. Faint but undeniable. A warped, bleached outline pressed into the earth, almost like it had melted there. He swallowed hard. The shape was too exact to be natural, not a boulder, not a shadow. It was long, boxy, faded white, tilted slightly off angle between two canyon walls, like it had tried to disappear and failed halfway through. A vehicle, buried, hidden, forgotten. Jake leaned in, shaking. He copied the coordinates and pasted them into another program, measured the scale, the length, the proportions. He'd memorized those measurements 18 years ago. He didn't want to say it out loud, didn't want to even think it, but his gut already knew. It was the Suburban, Emily and Aaron's Suburban. The Reddit post was spreading fast. Dozens of users had started speculating, some calling it an RV, others saying it was probably abandoned junk. A few made jokes, but buried deep in the thread, one comment tagged him directly. "At Jake Dawson, Texas, isn't this where your brother and his wife went missing? Looks like the same make year from that case. Damn." His inbox exploded. Emails, messages, pings from old blogs he hadn't checked in years. For the first time in almost 2 decades, people remembered. But Jake wasn't thinking about that. He wasn't thinking about the sudden wave of attention, or the Reddit sleuths, or what came next. He just stared at that pale shape in the canyon, his breath caught somewhere between grief and disbelief. "Is that you, Aaron?" he whispered. No one answered. Just the wind outside his apartment window, rustling against the blinds, sounding eerily like desert sand shifting in the silence. The Arizona heat hit like a slap. It was early morning when Jake pulled up to the ranger station in a dusty rental sedan, the dashboard already hot enough to peel skin. He stepped out into the windless silence, that eerie stillness deserts tend to keep, like the land is holding its breath. Ranger Miller was waiting by a Jeep, sunglasses low on his nose, a folded topographic map clutched in one hand. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice dry, more caution than doubt. Jake didn't answer. He just nodded, eyes locked on the horizon. The drive took nearly an hour, no paved roads, just rock and rattle and the occasional bleached cow skull marking time. They parked where the Jeep couldn't go further and continued on foot, hiking across cracked earth and knee-high brush, the sun drawing sweat from Jake's skin in slow, stinging rivulets. The canyon came into view all at once. From above, it didn't look like much, just another sun-scarred dip in the terrain. But as they reached the edge and began descending, Jake could feel his chest tightening. Then he saw it. At first it was just a curve, a line that didn't match the rock, then the slope of a metal roof, half sunken in the dirt. The paint had blistered and peeled, sun-bleached to bone white, but the shape was still there, unmistakable. The 1991 Suburban, his brother's car. The desert had tried to bury it, but time hadn't finished the job. The passenger side was crumpled against the canyon wall, like it had skidded sideways down a slope and wedged there for eternity. Jake stumbled forward, hands trembling. He didn't need permission, didn't wait for Miller. He crouched by the driver's side, a cracked mirror, a rusted wiper frozen in mid-swipe, the door handle still intact. Then he saw it. A frayed piece of fabric snagged in a thorn bush beside the vehicle. Sun-faded, but unmistakably blue with small white stars. Emily's scarf. Jake reached out, but his fingers stopped just short. He stood there for a long time, the canyon wind stirring faintly around him. Closure was supposed to feel like peace. But this was something else. Like finding a heartbeat inside a coffin. Like hearing someone whisper your name in a house you thought was empty. The air inside the Suburban was heavier than the heat outside. Jake approached slowly, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots muffled by the canyon's dead silence. Ranger Miller kept a respectful distance, hands on his hips, saying nothing. He knew this moment didn't belong to anyone else. The driver's side door groaned open, hinges protesting after 18 years of sun and sand. A plume of fine red dust erupted from the cabin like it had been holding its breath all this time. A dry exhale from a forgotten tomb. Jake peered in. There were two bodies, or what was left of them. Skeletons, dressed in tatters. Slumped forward, seat belts still loosely wrapped around sun-bleached rib cages. One wore the faded remains of a black t-shirt, the other a sleeveless blouse and strands of what had once been long brown hair, now just brittle threads clinging to the cracked headrest. Aaron and Emily, still side by side, still facing forward, as if they had simply fallen asleep. Jake didn't cry. He thought he would, but the moment was too big, too dry. His throat, his chest, his eyes, all locked in a quiet disbelief that grief hadn't caught up to yet. Instead, he leaned forward. The inside of the Suburban was surprisingly untouched. Dust-coated, yes, cracked plastic and moldy leather. But the cassette deck still held Emily's mixtape. The rearview mirror dangled from a single wire. The keys were still in the ignition. But something felt wrong. The glove compartment hung open. Jake blinked, reached inside carefully. It was empty, except for a torn rubber band and a broken pencil. But Jake remembered something vividly. Emily always kept a small journal in the glove box. She wrote in it every morning. Poems, dreams, strange things she saw on the road. Gone. He checked under the seats, the back seat, the trunk space. Nothing. The silence started to itch. This wasn't a crash. The Suburban hadn't slammed into the canyon at full speed. There was no shattered glass, no bent steering column. It had rolled, slid, stopped, and whoever found it first had opened the glove box. Jake looked back toward the canyon ridge, suddenly feeling watched, like the dust itself was hiding someone's footprints. The light shifted as the sun slipped behind the canyon ridge, throwing long shadows across the Suburban's rusted roof. Jake stayed crouched beside the passenger side door, staring into the half-collapsed interior, the smell of dry rot and rust curling at the edges of his memory. He opened the rear passenger door. It stuck halfway, warped from heat or time, and let out a screech that echoed into the canyon like a warning. Inside, beneath a pile of discolored fabric and a crushed soda can, he saw it, just the corner at first. Tucked behind the front passenger seat. a flash of white and ash, barely visible. He reached in carefully. A photograph, half burned, curled at the edges. The image was scarred and faded, the bottom right corner eaten away by fire, blackened and brittle. He turned it over slowly, like it might disintegrate in his hands. It was Emily, not smiling, not posing, just standing near the Suburban, arms crossed, wind in her hair. She looked tense, like she hadn't meant to be photographed. The image felt accidental, candidate. But that wasn't what made Jake freeze. In the background, standing several yards away near what looked like a gas pump, was a man. Not blurry, not some vague silhouette. A man in full uniform. Jake leaned closer. The badge was too burned to read, but the patch on the shoulder was clear enough. Security. He didn't recognize the face. The angle was sharp, the mouth set in a hard line. Watching. Not looking at the camera. Looking at Emily. His presence changed everything. Jake's pulse rose. He flipped the photo, searching for a date, a note, anything. Nothing. He stared at the burned corner again. Someone had tried to destroy this, tried to make sure it disappeared with the rest of them, but it hadn't burned all the way. Jake stood in the canyon wind, fingers tightening around the photo like it might vanish if he let go. There had been someone else with them, someone close, watching, and maybe, just maybe, someone still watching now. Jake didn't sleep the night he returned from the canyon. He sat at his kitchen table, lights off, the burned Polaroid propped up against a half-empty coffee mug. That man in the background haunted every thought. Not because of what he was doing, but because of what he wasn't doing. He wasn't walking by. He wasn't lost in the frame. He was watching Emily, like he knew she was going to disappear. Jake reopened the old case file he'd digitized years ago. Notes, witness statements, vehicle logs. Among the clutter, one detail came back to him. A gas station in Page, Arizona. A clerk had reported seeing the couple the day after their wedding. It was never confirmed, just a vague sighting. Jake picked up the phone and called the Page Police Department. By some miracle, a dusty archive room still held backup tapes from a nearby Chevron, converted to digital years ago but left unexamined. The footage had been buried in an evidence box labeled Unsolved Road Disappearances. Jake requested a viewing. The officer on duty was young, uninterested, and skeptical until the tape loaded. June 19, 1991. 2:14 p.m. There they were. Aaron pumping gas. Emily inside, paying cash at the register, visibly distressed. Her hands trembled as she handed over a crumpled $5 bill. She turned once, toward the lot, then quickly looked away. Jake leaned in, pulse pounding. Outside, behind their Suburban, another vehicle pulled in, a brown sedan, late 80s model, dark windows. It idled there, engine running. The driver never stepped out. Jake fast-forwarded. Emily rushed out of the store, grabbing Aaron's arm. They exchanged hurried words. Aaron glanced at the sedan, just once, then nodded. He didn't finish fueling. They left. The brown sedan followed, slowly, deliberately. There was no plate visible, no clear frame of the driver. But the intent was obvious. Jake sat back in his chair, fists clenched. This was it. The last time anyone saw them alive. Emily had known they were being followed. She wasn't just anxious, she was terrified. And Aaron, he hadn't dismissed it. He believed her. He'd seen the car too. That brown sedan wasn't just a footnote. It was the shadow trailing them into nowhere. And the man in the Polaroid, uniformed, watching, might have been the one behind the wheel. Jake closed the video player and stared at the frozen image on the screen. This wasn't just a honeymoon gone wrong. This was a hunt, and someone had made sure they were never found. The call came after midnight. Jake hadn't spoken to his parents in weeks, not since the discovery in the canyon. They had sent a few quiet messages, mostly full of words that meant nothing. Thinking of you. Be careful. We're proud of you. But now Jake needed answers. He drove to their home just outside San Angelo, a place frozen in time. Same flower boxes, same porch swing that creaked in the wind. His mother opened the door before he knocked. "Jake," she breathed, as if she'd been expecting this moment for years. His father sat in the living room, reclined in the same chair where Aaron used to sit during family dinners, back when everything still made sense. The television was on, muted. Some wildlife documentary playing lions devouring a carcass. No one said anything for a while. Jake didn't sit. He pulled the burned Polaroid from his jacket pocket and set it on the coffee table. The image faced upward, crooked, like it was accusing them both. "Do you know who that is?" he asked. His father squinted, shook his head. "Number Y?" His mother didn't look. Jake's voice rose. "They were being followed. That man was watching them. And you never told me Emily called you." Silence. His mother's eyes welled. Her mouth opened, but the words stuck. Her hands gripped her sleeves, trembling. His father leaned forward. "That's not... We didn't think..." Jake cut him off. "She called, didn't she? Before they disappeared?" His mother collapsed into herself, a sob catching like a knot in her throat. "It was... just once," she whispered. "A payphone. I could hear cars. And wind. She sounded like she was hiding." Jake knelt in front of her, staring into her eyes. "What did she say?" She wiped her face, voice barely audible. She said, someone was following them, that they'd taken a wrong turn, that something wasn't right. And then she said, Jake held his breath. She said, "If anything happens, don't look for us. Just forget us." The words landed like a slap. His father looked away, ashamed. "We thought maybe she was panicking. Maybe she and Aaron ran off. We didn't want to believe." Jake stood, heart pounding. They hadn't just disappeared. They had called for help. And someone had been listening. Someone who made sure that call would be forgotten. The Polaroid had become Jake's obsession. He scanned it at the highest possible resolution, zooming in until each burned pixel looked like a fragment of a secret. For hours he adjusted filters, played with contrast, inverted colors, anything to bring clarity to that single figure standing just behind Emily. Then, something clicked. The patch on the man's uniform. It wasn't law enforcement. It wasn't military. It wasn't even police adjacent. It was industrial. 2 words curved across the faded insignia. Clayton Mine Security. Jake froze. Clayton Mine. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 20 years. A sprawling copper and lithium extraction site about 30 miles east of the Grand Canyon's rim. It had operated for decades until 1992, the year after Aaron and Emily vanished, when it abruptly shut down amid whispers of environmental violations and labor abuse. Publicly, the company blamed water contamination and legal pressure. Privately, no one talked about it. Jake dug deeper. Clayton Mine wasn't just abandoned. It had been scrubbed. Online records were minimal. Employee lists, incident reports, payroll data, all either deleted or conveniently lost in a system migration. But the location matched. The path from the gas station in Page curved directly past the mine road. And from the canyon where the Suburban was found, 10 miles, as the crow flies. Jake stared at the screen. Emily wasn't just scared because someone was following them. She'd recognized him. That man. That patch. She'd seen it before. Maybe in town. Maybe at the gas station. Maybe even earlier. She knew where they were being taken. Or at least, where they weren't supposed to go. Jake leaned back in his chair, mind racing. They didn't disappear randomly. They were rerouted, intercepted, led toward a place where people didn't ask questions and didn't talk when things went wrong. He closed the file and opened a new one, began a list. Former Clayton employees, supervisors, known security staff. He wasn't just chasing shadows anymore. He had a name, a place, and someone in that place had gone very quiet, very fast, right after his brother vanished. The motel was still there, a crumbling one-story box just off Route 89, a place that looked like it had been forgotten by time, or maybe chosen to be forgotten. A faded neon vacancy sign buzzed in the window even though the sun was still up. The front desk smelled like cigarettes and ammonia, and the clerk behind the counter looked like he hadn't moved in 20 years. Jake placed a photo of Aaron and Emily on the counter. June 1991, he said. Did they stay here? The man squinted. He was in his 60s now, thin, pale, with a faded tattoo on his forearm that disappeared under a torn flannel sleeve. He stared at the photo longer than Jake expected. Then he nodded. I remember him, he said. Big guy, kinda quiet. The girl looked off. Off? Jake asked, leaning in. The clerk scratched his chin. Skittish, kept looking over her shoulder, like someone might walk in. She stood back near the vending machine while he signed the log. Jake's heart thumped. Did they say where they were going? No, the man said, then paused. He paid cash, asked if there was a back exit, said not to tell anyone they'd stayed. Jake blinked. He said that? The clerk nodded. Real calm about it too, said it like he'd done it before. Jake stood still, the gravity of it pressing down on him. Aaron hadn't been clueless. He knew. He'd seen the brown sedan, the man in the uniform, the change in Emily's eyes. And instead of running to the police, he went quiet, protective, calculated. Jake felt both pride and pain. His brother had tried to shield her, to get off the radar, but whatever they were running from had been faster, smarter. Jake asked for the logbook. The man hesitated, then pulled out a box from beneath the counter, dusty, torn, filled with handwritten guest logs on yellowing paper. He flipped to June 1991. Room 6B, Aaron Dawson, no plate number, no signature from Emily, just one note, scribbled beside their name in a different pen. Don't disturb. Jake stared at it, his pulse cold. Aaron knew they were being hunted, and he was doing everything he could to buy them just one more day. Jake wasn't sure why he went into the garage that night. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe grief made people superstitious. Or maybe something was pulling him. Some invisible thread stitched through time, yanking at the one part of the past no one had ever opened. His parents had stored Aaron's things in a sealed plastic bin after the funeral that never was, taped shut, labeled in black marker, a ARONPERSONAL. Jake peeled it open slowly. Inside, the smell of time. Old t-shirts, a torn flannel, a stack of worn cassette tapes, and at the bottom, an answering machine. Bulky, yellowed from heat, the kind with real spools inside. He lifted it out and stared. There was a tape still loaded. He set it on the workbench, plugged it into a long-forgotten extension cord, and held his breath as the red light blinked once, then twice. One new message. His heart climbed into his throat. He pressed play. Jake, if you get this. The voice froze him. It was Emily, frantic, breathy. Her words rushed, like someone was standing just outside the door. We saw something. We thought it was nothing, but it's not. I think they're watching us. If anything happens, a loud thump in the background, a door, a scream, then static, then, Jake, please, don't trust. The tape hissed, popped, went dead. Jake didn't move. His fingers gripped the edge of the bench until his knuckles went white. The machine kept spinning, as if it had more to say. But there was nothing else. Just silence. Emily had tried. She'd reached out. She'd warned him. And someone had cut her off mid-sentence. He rewound the tape, played it again. Every syllable stabbed deeper. That moment, just before the static, where she gasped. The kind of gasp you make when someone grabs your arm and you weren't expecting it. He leaned in, turned the volume up. Just before the tape ended, there was a voice. Low, muffled. Not hers. A man's voice. It was only one word. Enough. Jake hit pause. His whole body buzzed with a cold that no Arizona desert could ever burn away. They hadn't just been lost. They'd been silenced. And someone with power, access, and proximity had made sure that no one ever heard this tape until now. Jake didn't sleep the next 2 nights. He made copies of everything: the voicemail tape, the Polaroid, the gas station footage, the motel ledger, printed, backed up, encrypted. He put one copy in a safety deposit box, another in a padded envelope addressed to a journalist he vaguely trusted. Then he walked into the Coconino County Sheriff's Office and laid it all out. Detective Harris was in his 40s, weary-eyed, skeptical, but he listened. He watched the footage, studied the photograph, played the tape 3 times. He asked Jake to leave everything with him. "Someone will call you by the end of the week," he said. "We'll dig into this." Jake left with a flicker of hope, but no one called. 5 days passed, then 6, and on the 7th, something strange happened. Jake was driving back from the grocery store, 2 bags in the passenger seat, radio off, mind swimming, when his brake pedal gave out. No resistance, no grind, just air. He hit the emergency brake, swerved, clipped a guardrail, and barely managed to stop before a drop-off. His hands shook as he stepped out. He wasn't injured, not badly, just a bloody elbow and a heart trying to claw its way out of his chest. The mechanic who inspected the car called him the next morning. "You didn't do this yourself, right?" "Do what?" "The brake line," the man said. "It was clean cut, like surgically." Jake didn't answer. Later that afternoon, someone from the sheriff's office called him back, but not Detective Harris. A woman with a clipped tone. She told him the case had been reviewed. There were no new actionable leads. The photo wasn't enough. The tape, possibly fabricated. The canyon discovery, circumstantial. The incident with the brakes, labeled accidental, filed, closed. Jake stood by his window that evening, watching the empty street. A black sedan passed by slowly. Same shape, same engine hum. It didn't stop, just lingered. Jake backed away from the glass. For 18 years, no one cared what happened to Aaron and Emily. Now, suddenly, someone cared a lot. Too much. The Clayton mine was supposed to be dead. Jake drove for 3 hours through blistering daylight to reach it, past scorched hills, rusted fences, and cattle skulls that had turned bone white under a sky that never blinked. The access road was gated, but the lock was old, weak. A single blow with a crowbar and the chain snapped loose, clattering to the dirt like a warning bell no one answered. The mine spread out below like a scar, skeletal buildings, conveyor belts long frozen in rust, empty drums and collapsed trailers. Nature had begun reclaiming it, but not fast enough. Everything still felt industrial, hollow, as if it had just been evacuated rather than abandoned. Jake walked through the main yard slowly, boots crunching over gravel and dust. No sounds, no birds, just wind slicing between corrugated walls and broken glass. Then he found the office, a squat building near the main shaft. Its door half-hinged, swinging in the breeze like an invitation no one sane would accept. Inside, the air was dry and metallic. old paper, old oil, old secrets. The desk drawers had been emptied, mostly. Jake ran a hand along the wall. Behind a leaning filing cabinet, something stuck out, the corner of a folder, wedged into the seam between drywall and floor. He pulled it loose. Inside were photographs, stacks of them. Emily at a gas station, her expression guarded. Aaron pumping gas beside her. The Suburban parked outside the motel. Their license plate, clear, centered, circled in red ink. Jake's stomach twisted. These weren't memories. They were surveillance. Another photo showed the Suburban parked at the edge of a cliff, the very ridge above the canyon where they'd been found. This shot wasn't from a distance. It was close, personal. Someone had followed them all the way there, planned their route, documented their last hours. Jake stepped back, folder in hand, the dust swirling around his boots like ghosts trying to rise. This wasn't a random abduction. It wasn't a robbery. It was an operation. And whatever it had been, mining cover-up, human tracking, blackmail, it had lived here and been shut down fast. Jake turned to leave but paused at the door. On the wall, scribbled in marker above a faded calendar, were 3 words. She knew first. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain. Unmarked. No return address, just Jake's name, scribbled in blocky handwriting that looked rushed. Inside was a notebook. Slim. Red leather. The corners were frayed, the spine cracked with age. A post-it note was stuck to the front. She told me to send this, if anything ever happened. Linda C. Jake froze. Linda. Emily's co-worker from the environmental center. He hadn't spoken to her since the early days of the disappearance, back when people still answered calls and believed in maybe. He opened the journal slowly. The first few pages were normal. Dates, dream fragments, a poem about dust and water. But halfway through, Emily's handwriting changed, slanted, hurried, crowded against the edges. I think they know. The pipeline site is wrong. The maps don't match. Jake was right. People are disappearing. Jake flipped further. Aaron says I'm paranoid, but something happened near the mine. We passed it by accident. I saw the trucks, not water trucks. Something else. Sealed. No logos. There's no permit on file, no paper trail, nothing. Then, underlined twice. If anything happens, it's not an accident. Jake stared at the page. Her fear bled through the ink. She hadn't just suspected danger. She had known. She'd planned for it. Left a trail not because she believed she'd survive, but because she didn't expect to. At the back of the journal, tucked into the last page, was a photocopy of an old incident report, one that had never surfaced in police files. It referenced a missing geologist from the Clayton site, last seen conducting groundwater testing in April 1991. Vanished. No explanation. Emily had circled one line in red ink. Status. Quiet termination. No further action required. Jake's hand trembled. She'd been gathering evidence, connecting dots, and someone had been erasing the lines faster than she could write them, but not fast enough, not completely, because now Jake had it, and someone else was going to read it next. She lived in a trailer just outside Flagstaff, barely visible from the highway, tucked behind a row of dying pines and a rusted-out pickup with no tires. Jake found her through a forgotten name scribbled in the back of Emily's journal. L. Morales, night shift. Her door opened before he even knocked. The woman standing there looked like she hadn't slept in days. Stringy gray hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes sunken, sharp. A patch-covered jacket hung off her narrow frame. The old Clayton mine security insignia, still stitched to the shoulder, faded but visible. "You Jake?" she rasped. He nodded. She stepped aside. "You've got 10 minutes. Inside smelled of instant coffee, old paper, and something vaguely metallic. Every window was covered with tinfoil. A police scanner crackled softly in the background. "I saw your name online," she said, settling into a creaking chair. "Didn't think you'd find me." Jake pulled out the Polaroid. "This man, you know him?" She didn't look. "Yeah," she said. "I knew all of them." "Why did they vanish?" She lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "Because they saw something they weren't supposed to." Jake leaned forward. "What?" She took a long drag. "There was a dump site, off-grid, not for mining waste, for other things. Bio stuff, chemicals, stuff that glows in the dark and makes birds fall out of the sky." Jake blinked. "They must have stopped. Emily, I think, realized where they were. Took a wrong turn that wasn't wrong at all." Her voice cracked. "They got close enough to see the buried drums." Jake's chest tightened. "They were never supposed to make it out," Morales whispered. "No one ever did." He stared. "You knew, and you said nothing." "I tried," she snapped, "but they cleaned house, threatened us. One guy who asked too many questions had a fall into the shaft. After that, I shut up, stayed alive." Jake stood slowly, heart pounding. "Why now?" She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Because she tried. Emily. She tried to warn someone, and she failed." A long silence. "But maybe you won't." Jake nodded once. The chair creaked behind him. As he walked out the door, she called after him. "Be careful what you dig up. Some graves bury back." Jake had samples taken from the site, quietly. He contacted a freelance environmental researcher, someone he found through a whistleblower database, the kind of person who asked no questions but tested everything. They met under the cover of dusk, near the old Clayton shaft entrance. No lights, no words louder than a whisper. 2 days later, the results came in. Jake opened the email in his car, parked on a ridge overlooking the mine. The wind howled outside, but his world went still. Human DNA detected, multiple samples. Fragments of degraded bone protein. Partial remains, at least 4 individuals. The soil near the northeast waste pit wasn't just toxic. It was a graveyard. He dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, throat dry. His mind spun. Emily's journal, the missing geologist, that buried phrase, quiet termination. The EPA had inspected the mine just once, in early '92, right after it closed. Their findings were inconclusive. Files sealed, archived, classified under national interest. Jake requested the documents under FOIA. 3 days later, he received a rejection. The message was clear. This information is exempt from disclosure under Section 7A, active federal protection oversight. In other words, stay out. But Jake already knew. Emily had seen those drums. She'd likely photographed them. Maybe she even collected a sample, something that proved the mine had buried more than chemicals, something that connected a face to a crime. That's why they died, not in an accident, not lost in the desert, but silenced, systematically, deliberately. Jake walked the ridge above the mine at sunset, the sky painted in blood-orange streaks. The air smelled like copper and rot. The place looked peaceful now, quiet, abandoned, distant. But beneath his feet, the land remembered. It remembered Emily, Aaron, and whoever else had been deemed a liability. He closed his eyes, the wind pressing against his jacket, sharp as broken glass. This wasn't just his brother's story anymore. It was everyone's story who had disappeared without a name. And it wasn't over. Not yet. The retirement home sat on a hill outside Phoenix, gated, quiet, pristine. Birds chirped along manicured hedges, and wind chimes sang softly from every third porch. It was the kind of place meant to erase the past. But Jake wasn't here for peace. He was here for the man who signed the orders, Arthur G. Maddox, former operations director for Western Apex, the parent company that had once owned Clayton Mine. A name buried in merger paperwork, shareholder reports, and legal footnotes. It had taken Jake weeks to track him, longer to confirm he was still alive. Now, he sat in a wheelchair on the back patio, wrapped in a beige cardigan, his face leathery and collapsed in on itself, but his eyes still sharp. Jake approached slowly. "You're Arthur Maddox." The man didn't flinch, just looked at him. "You're late," he said quietly. Jake blinked. "You knew I'd come?" Maddox gave the faintest smile. "Eventually. Someone always does." Jake sat across from him, pulled out a copy of the Polaroid, set it on the table between them. "This is Emily. She was with my brother. They vanished in 1991, at your mine." Maddox didn't look at the photo. "They weren't supposed to get that far," he said, almost like reciting. "But they did. Took photos. Called someone. That was enough." Jake's hands curled into fists. "You knew they were killed?" Maddox nodded once. Slow, heavy. "I didn't order it, not directly. But I knew what the protocol was, and I didn't stop it." Jake leaned in. "Why?" Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "Because we were protecting billions. Lithium contracts, national defense partnerships. You think people die for oil? That mine had 100 secrets deeper than copper. They were just in the wrong place, with the wrong eyes." Jake's throat tightened. "She called for help." Maddox looked away. "Doesn't matter. When the cleanup team goes in, it's not about innocence. It's about silence." Jake stood, his legs unsteady, his stomach full of bile. "You're going to confess, on camera, now." Maddox didn't resist, didn't argue. He just said, "Make it quick. I want to be done with this." Jake turned on the recorder, and the last man left who remembered why they vanished finally said the words out loud. Jake tried everything. He emailed journalists, local, national, independent. He sent them the photos, the journal, the DNA report, the voice message, even the full confession from Maddox, voice shaking but clear. Most never replied. The few who did gave the same polite brush off. "We're unable to verify. Too risky without corroboration. It's not something we can publish right now." One reporter told him off the record, "That mine? It's part of a federal quiet list. You go near it, the walls start to move. Trust me, walk away." Jake didn't. He went to the police next. Detective Harris was gone. Transferred, apparently. Somewhere out of reach. The woman who replaced him offered him a cup of coffee and a statement form, then lost both before the end of the week. Jake tried the state office, the EPA, the Department of the Interior. Every trail circled back to the same wall, classified. The mining company? Officially dissolved in 1994, but Jake traced its assets to a shell company, then another, until the final name was nothing but a set of initials and a mailbox in Delaware. Nothing existed. Not the records, not the people, not even the name Clayton Mine. Jake sat at his kitchen table that night, documents spread around him like bones in a graveyard, each one real, tangible, unreadable to the world. The phone rang once, no caller ID, then silence. A minute later, his internet cut out. Jake knew what this was. It wasn't a threat. It was a shrug, a reminder that the system wasn't broken. It was built this way, to lose the files, to retire the men, to bury the names, to make sure Aaron and Emily's story ended in a place no one could find on any map, except his. Jake looked at the burned photo again. Emily's eyes halfway turned to the camera, like she knew, like she'd always known, and still chose to speak anyway. Jake stared at the cassette one last time, the tape that had haunted him, That had cracked open everything. That had cost him sleep, safety, peace, but given him the only thing he had left of her, Emily's voice. He cleaned up the audio, removed the static, sharpened the edges, amplified her whisper until every breath sounded like it came from just behind your ear. Then he uploaded it. No title, no tags, just a simple caption. This is Emily. She disappeared in 1991. She wanted you to know why. And the internet did what the system never could. It listened. The tape spread like wildfire. Reddit threads ignited. TikTok users played clips of her broken sentence again and again. Don't trust. Trying to finish it. Trying to guess what she meant, who she feared. YouTubers broke down every second. Podcasts dissected the mind, the surveillance, the voice. They found the corporate links, the missing files, the hidden deaths. Emily became a signal. A sound passed through time. A symbol for every story that never made it past the gate. Jake watched in silence as the views climbed. 1 million, then 5, then 20. Her voice echoing into places she never lived long enough to see. Then the comments began. I remember that mine. My uncle disappeared near there in 91. My dad worked security at a place like this. He died without saying a word. My mom said never to ask about the Arizona thing. This is it, isn't it? The floodgates cracked. Emily was no longer a footnote. She was a witness. Jake didn't feel triumph, only ache, only absence. But then, an email from a girl in Oregon, barely 20, studying environmental law. She wrote, I didn't know who Emily was until today, but I'm not going to forget her name. She tried. Now it's my turn. Jake read it twice. Then again. For the first time in months, he smiled. Because Emily's voice hadn't died in that canyon. It had just taken 18 years to reach the surface. The canyon was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that wraps itself around you like a memory. The kind that presses into your ribs, deep and still, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. Jake stood alone near the ledge where the Suburban had been found. The sun had begun to set, spilling firelight across the cliffs, orange, red, violet. It looked unreal, like the sky was mourning something it had held in secret too long. In his hands, he carried two things, the Polaroid and Emily's journal. He knelt by a flat stone, the one the officers had marked with spray paint months earlier, and set them both down gently. The Polaroid faced the canyon. The journal rested beneath it, pages fluttering in the wind. Jake exhaled. You didn't vanish, he said quietly. His voice echoed, swallowed by the open air. They just made us forget. The wind picked up. Dust rose around his feet. And for a moment, Jake felt something strange. Not comfort, exactly, but presence. As if the canyon itself had been waiting, not for justice, not for revenge, but for witness. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small tin. Inside, 2 rings, Aaron's wedding band, and the one they'd found in the passenger seat bent slightly at the base. He set them down side by side. Wherever you are, he whispered, this is yours now. He sat there as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the sky dimming to a bruised purple. Birds circled high above. Somewhere behind him, a coyote called. Jake didn't move. He didn't cry. He just stayed. Let the silence have its say. Because for 18 years no one had remembered this place. But tonight, it remembered them. The cafe was tucked between 2 bookstores on the east side of Tucson. No sign, no Wi-Fi, cash only, just the way she liked it. Her name was Mara Singh. She had once been nominated for a Pulitzer. Then she wrote about a defense contractor no one wanted mentioned. And everything disappeared. Column, platform, grants, gone. But she didn't stop writing. She just stopped being loud. Jake slid a flash drive across the table. It clinked against her coffee mug. "Everything's on there," he said. "The photos, the journal, the soil tests, Maddox's confession." Mara didn't flinch. She didn't ask why he brought it. She simply took it and tucked it inside her coat. "I know it's dangerous," Jake added. She met his eyes. "That's how I know it's worth doing." Silence fell between them. Jake looked down, hands clenched. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She tried to tell the truth. Emily. She warned me. She left pieces everywhere, hoping someone would finish the story." Mara took a sip of coffee. "Then that's what we'll do." He blinked. "We? You gave me the facts," she said. "Now I'll give them a voice." Jake exhaled. Slowly. The tension in his shoulders loosened for the first time in weeks. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was a copy of the Polaroid, the unburned version. Emily's face, clearer now. Her eyes locked on the camera, jaw set, determined. "I promised her I'd finish it," he said, setting the photo down. "No matter who tried to stop me." Mara nodded. "She won't be forgotten. Not this time." Jake stood, his chair creaking slightly. He looked back once before walking away. Outside, the sun had begun to rise, and somewhere deep underground, beneath layers of dirt, silence, and time, the truth had finally begun to move. The satellite image was still there. Zoom in far enough, past the cliffs, past the brush, past the nothingness. And there it was. A small glint near the canyon's edge, barely more than a pixel, still faintly visible on Google Maps, the same image that had sparked everything. The same image that, 18 years later, had whispered through a screen to a man planning a hike. But now, there was a difference. A pin. A simple blue marker placed by someone, no one knew who or when exactly, labeled with just 6 words: Emily and Aaron Dawson, found. And beneath it, the comments. They came from all over. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Now over 5,000. "We remember you. You mattered. I hope you found peace. You were never forgotten." Some messages came from strangers, others from people who once knew them. Classmates, neighbors, someone who'd once worked with Emily at the center. There was a photo posted too. A scanned yearbook page with Aaron's face circled in red. "He always lent me his pencil," someone wrote. "Always smiled. I wish I'd told him that." Jake read the messages late at night, long after the noise had quieted. He never replied. He didn't have to. The map spoke for him now. A pin, a glint, a canyon, and 2 names that would never be erased again. Jake returned to the canyon one last time, not for answers, not for closure, but because some places deserved to be visited, not just remembered. He parked at the same overlook where it had all started. The air was colder now, the sky streaked with soft gold. He could see his breath in the morning light. A stone marker had been placed near the ledge. Not official, not government-issued, but hand-carved, smooth, thoughtful, in memory of Emily and Aaron Dawson. 1993. Wonder below it, someone had tied a ribbon to the twisted remains of a weathered mesquite branch. The wind played with it gently. Red fabric dancing against the pale sky. Jake sat beside the marker for a long time, legs folded, palms flat against the earth. He pulled out a small notebook, not Emily's, but his own. Pages filled with scribbled thoughts, half-finished letters, maps, all the things he'd carried with him across those 18 years. He tore one page out, folded it, then pressed it under a stone at the base of the marker. "You were never lost to me." Behind him, faint footsteps approached. A girl, maybe 16, stood with her father, holding a wildflower bouquet. Jake nodded gently. She placed the flowers down and whispered something he couldn't hear, but he didn't need to. He understood, because after all these years, the canyon was no longer just a place of disappearance. It was a place of return, of memory, of names spoken aloud. The girl and her father left in silence. Jake stayed a little longer, watching the sun lift over the ridge, painting the landscape in warm orange light. Some wounds never close, but they become part of you, like rings in a tree, like fault lines in rock, like pixels on a map. And sometimes, after all these years, that's enough. A year passed. In a university library across the country, a student was cataloging oral histories for a digital archive when she stumbled across a submission marked only Case A 91-107, full transcription. She pressed play. Emily's voice poured through the speakers, fragile, urgent, defiant. Then Jake's narration, then Maddox's confession, the full story, woven together in a way no one had ever aired publicly. She didn't look away, not once. By morning, the clip had gone live on the university's public archive. By evening, it was embedded in investigative blogs, environmental justice reports, and true crime retrospectives. A truth that had been buried under 18 years of dirt had finally been filed where it could be found forever. Jake started hearing from families, one by one, sons, daughters, siblings of people who had also vanished near industrial sites in the Southwest. Names never added to reports, stories that ended with silence. But now, with Emily and Aaron's case out in the open, patterns emerged. A mosaic of missing pieces. Someone began charting them, building a public map of all the disappearances linked to defunct mining and extraction projects. 1 dot became 10. 10 became 50. A new investigation opened, quietly, then not so quietly. Jake didn't lead the charge, but he no longer walked alone. The grief he had carried privately for nearly 2 decades had become part of something larger, a movement. 10 years later, a plaque stands at the edge of the canyon, beneath a small shelter built from reclaimed wood. Visitors leave notes, trinkets, small tokens, not just for Emily and Aaron, but for all the lost, all the unnamed. A gravel path leads in. Quiet benches wait beneath the trees. Jake comes once a year. He never says much, just sits, listens, watches the wind curl through the valley. The canyon no longer feels like a wound. It feels like memory, living, present, held. Some people pass through and don't even know what happened here. Others stop. They read the plaque, and for a moment, the silence that once swallowed everything speaks back. Because some stories don't vanish. They wait, buried under silence, beneath pixels, between redacted lines and whispered names. And when they finally rise, when truth claws its way to the surface, it doesn't ask for applause. It asks to be remembered. Emily and Aaron never came home, but their voices did. Their choices did. The lives they touched echoed far beyond that canyon, into courtrooms, classrooms, and quiet corners of the internet. The canyon didn't forget them, and now neither will we. Because what was once just a glint on a map became a light no one could put out.